Hey, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here for Building a Budget Battle Plan. Let me introduce myself. My name is Rick Paladin, Director of Operations for the Network of Related Pastors, also lead pastor of Bridge City Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Network of Related Pastors is an oversight organization committed to creating healthy leaders and healthy churches. And that's really the purpose of today's webinar. We want to empower you to help manage your church's finances with excellence. And the budgeting process is a vital part of doing that. Hey, I am so excited that we're here together. Co-host Mia Salino. Mia, could you please introduce yourself to our great group of people ready to go today?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mia Salino, CPA and CEO of the Align Consulting Group, an accounting firm established to support churches and faith-based organizations with their accounting and financial needs. I am also the director of accounting for the Network of Related Pastors and author of the 5-Point Alignment Method.
Hey, before we get into today's topic, let me just cover a few things. First of all, we're going to be giving a free giveaway today to somebody at the end of today's webinar, an NRP mug and one of Mia's books, The 5-Point Alignment Method. You definitely want that book, whether you get it here or you get it from our website there. So who doesn't love a great cup of coffee and a great book? Also, at the end of this webinar, we're going to tell you how you can receive a 30-minute coaching call absolutely for free, either from Mia or myself, on budgeting and helping your church get the great budget that they need to. Last but not least, we have questions and answer time. So you can hit the Q&A on your toolbar, put in questions there. We're going to get to as many of these as we can by the end of our time together. So, hey, today's really casual. We're starting a conversation. It's not high pressure. It's not a classroom deal. We want to give you some practical ideas on how you can increase effectiveness of your budget in the way that you look at finances at your church. So here we go. Listen, I hope you have your favorite drink. I hope you're in a comfortable spot. We're going to get started. So here we are. Before we jump into the practical side of budgeting, let's take a moment to really start and stage today's conversation, which is really foundational to understand budgeting here. So no matter if you have a large church or small, if you've been established or you're a startup, it doesn't matter. Every church faces the same challenge. We have more ministry inside of us than we do money to accomplish. So how do we faithfully steward the resources God has entrusted to us so that we can accomplish the mission God has given us? Remember, God has given you a mission here, and that's what budgeting is all about. And yet for many churches, budgeting can feel intimidating, restrictive, or simply overwhelming. Mia, you and I have worked together for years on finances and budgets. I know your approach to budgeting is very different from the way many people think about it, and I'm excited that our audience today is going to hear your perspective. But before we talk about what budgeting actually is and how it becomes a valuable tool, I think it's important to acknowledge something. Budgeting can be an intimidating process. Now, you've worked with a lot of churches, a lot of nonprofits, and I'm sure that you've heard about every reason that there is about why, budgets aren't a part of the church or the nonprofit, why they can't be held to. So what are some of the things that you have heard?
Well, Pastor Rick, I certainly have heard a lot of excuses about the budgeting process over the years. And I think it's important for me to say, before I mention these statements, that these are not hypothetical examples. These are actual statements that I've heard from pastors and nonprofit leaders over the years. Number one, we've tried setting a budget, but there were too many things going on in the church that took precedence. We couldn't keep up with it, so we eventually abandoned it. Another one I've heard is, I don't see how we can set a budget when we don't know how much tithe is going to come in each month. We just have faith that God is going to provide the resources when we need them. Or then there's this one. I don't like to do budgets. Budgets are too restrictive. I want the freedom to respond when a need arises. Now, I understand the heart behind each one of these statements. Churches and pastors are busy, revenue can be unpredictable, and we absolutely want to remain responsive to what God is doing. But I believe that these statements reveal some common misconceptions about what budgeting is and what its purpose is. And that's what we want to address today. Budgeting is not about trying to predict the future perfectly, nor is it about restricting what God can do. It's about creating an intentional plan for stewarding the resources God provides. Our goal today is to reframe budgeting from merely a financial exercise where you just check the box to a process that can turn numbers into ministry momentum.
Now, Mia, I know that you've heard a lot of things, and I think you were being very gentle with the pastors and leaders of churches today and what you just communicated. I'm sure you've heard a lot more than just that. So thank you for taking it easy on us. But you know what I think of today as we go forward? I'm thinking about confidence, hope being restored. I'm thinking about a clear vision for the future. So I really appreciate what you had to say there. That's a great way to look at it. And I think it's an important foundation here. So before we get into the actual budgeting process, let's start with something basic. What exactly is a budget here? To answer this, we're going to look at a few definitions. Let's look at this first one. Mia, I know this is one of your favorites here. Budgeting is the process of creating a plan to track income, control expenses, and allocate financial resources over a specific period. It serves as a practical roadmap for individuals and organizations to reach their monetary goals. Now, Mia, why is that definition? Why are you so passionate about that one?
So this one is one of my favorites because it includes a few things. One, it does mention income. So budgeting is not only laying out a plan for your expenses, but also projecting revenue. So I like that this definition included that. Also, it mentions allocating financial resources over a specific period. And that really is what a budget is. Typically, we work with an annual budget, like what is our plan for the upcoming year? However, it's very important for churches and nonprofit organizations to have an idea of that 3 to 5 year plan as well. And then finally, this definition mentions the practical roadmap. And I love that because that is what budgeting is. It's our map that is going to get us from where the church is today to where God is calling it.
Somehow I knew roadmap was going to show up in your passion there. Hey, let's look at this another definition here. And here we go. Budgeting is the process of creating a plan to spend your money. Creating this spending plan allows you to determine in advance whether you will have enough money to do the things you need to do or would like to do. Please comment on that one as well, Mia.
Yeah, so I love this definition as well. I think this one is comparable to the Passion Translation of a budgeting definition. So I do like that. Of course, it states that it's a plan, and so that we want to interchange those terms, budget with plan, because that's what a budget is. It's a plan to spend your money. But also another thing I like about this particular definition is that it says when you create this plan, it allows you to determine in advance whether you will have enough money to do the things you want to do or need to do. And so that is super important. A budget plan answers the question in advance, do I have enough funds available to do this plan? So I like that one as well.
Very good. Now, in the 5-point alignment method, you also have a definition of budgeting. And so I want you to share now your definition, which is actually going to set the tone for the rest of our time together here.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get into that definition, I think it's important that we understand where the budgeting process fits within the 5-point alignment method. So as you can see on the slide, there are 5 components to a strong financial management structure: vision, budget, processes, review, and financial reporting. And it all starts and ends with vision. Where is God asking your church to go? What is he asking your church to do? Everything we do financially should ultimately support the answer to those questions. We have to remember the financial resources that come into the church are resources that God has entrusted to us to accomplish what he is asking us to do. So within the 5-point alignment method, the budget process follows having an understanding of the vision. The budget is the financial plan for deploying those resources to accomplish the vision God has given the church. So that leads us to our definition. According to the 5-point alignment method, budgeting is the process of translating a church's God-given vision into a quantified financial plan. It is the roadmap that charts the course between where the church is today and the destination God has called it to reach. Budgeting requires projecting the resources God will likely to provide, which is our revenue, and intentionally allocating those resources through a spending plan toward the activities that fulfill the church's mandate. So in simple terms, the budgeting process helps us ensure that every dollar, like an arrow, is aimed at the vision's target rather than being shot randomly in every direction.
Wow. So if I'm hearing you correctly, really today, we're covering like the first two parts of really the whole process of the 5-point alignment here. So I just wanted to focus on that this isn't the whole comprehensive plan, but this is the beginning of developing a great plan. I really like that picture that you have there. Every dollar like an arrow being aimed at the vision's target rather than being shot in any direction. Wow, that's very, very powerful. And that sets us up for another great illustration. It comes from one of your favorite movies. And I think it gives a great visual way to understand that idea of identifying the target, assessing what's in front of you, and then developing a plan to respond. Mia, set up this scene for everybody right here.
Yes. So, a picture really is worth 1,000 words. And for me, this is truly one of the best illustrations of the budgeting process. And it's a scene from my favorite Marvel movie, Captain America. So in this scene, you can remember this scene comes directly behind Captain America going behind enemy lines and rescuing all of the troops that were behind enemy lines. And he marches them back into his camp. And then the next scene following that, you see him dressed in his uniform. He has respect now, and he's standing with the rest of the team around an aerial map, and he is pointing out where he saw the enemy camps. And then together, they're beginning to develop a plan of attack. To me, this is an excellent picture of what budgeting really is. It's strategic planning. First, we seek God and get clarity about what he is asking the church to accomplish. Then we take an honest look at the resources available to us. And then we ask, how do we deploy the resources God has entrusted to us to accomplish what he is asking us to accomplish? That is budgeting. We're not simply listing expenses on a spreadsheet, which we will get to. We're developing a strategy to accomplishing the mission. And far from being restrictive, a good budget actually brings clarity and freedom. It's when it helps us to see in advance whether the resources we expect to receive are sufficient to cover the plans that we intend to set in motion to accomplish what we believe God is calling us to do. And when priorities are established in advance, it creates an accountability structure that helps keep our spending and our leadership aligned with the vision.
Somehow every time I hear you talk about that scene, I think we should have playing in the background, went to the enemy's camp and took back what he stole. I don't know. Absolutely. It just makes me want to get up and march around the room here, but that's Absolutely. Just going back to my roots here. But you said something very interesting there about freedom. And I never hear the word freedom be attached to a budget. Typically, it's restrictive. It's like there's moans and groans about budgeting here. So I love your approach, and I love the freshness of what you're communicating here, but also how you bring back every conversation about money goes back to vision, which is, now you're speaking my love language, which vision and where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. And you're right. It really is about obedience to God and fulfilling the mandate he has placed on his church here. So now we're going to move in to get a little more practical here. And so again, as we move into the practicum, I hope that your questions, please feed us your questions. We're going to get to as many of those as we can as we go along here. So click the Q&A there, and don't be afraid to ask any question along the way. So how do we actually begin the budgeting process? Like, when should a church begin? What time of year? And what are those first steps that we need to take?
Those are great questions. And to answer them, I think it's helpful to look at this timeline. So this is a graphic that I use when teaching budgeting in the 5-point alignment method online course. Now, typically, if you ask someone, what is the first step in creating a budget? You might hear things like, let's list our fixed expenses, or let's project our annual revenue. And although those are very important steps, which we will get to, they are not the first step. The budgeting process should actually begin with prayer and seeking the Lord. One of my favorite battle scripture verses comes from 2 Samuel chapter 5, when the Philistines were coming against David. And David sought the Lord for the battle plan. And the Lord told him, don't just march straight ahead, but circle around. And when you hear the sound of marching in the trees, then you will know that the Lord is going before you. And this is exactly what church leadership, the pastor and his top level team need to be doing in August. So for most churches, I recommend that this time of seeking the Lord begin in August. So the lead pastor and the church's top level of leadership, like I mentioned, whether it's the elder board, executive team, or another type of leadership structure, whatever that high level leadership team is, they should intentionally set aside time in August to begin to pray and seek the Lord about the upcoming year. This is why we scheduled this webinar in August, because now is the time to begin to seek the Lord about his plans for next year. And for some churches that I work with, they also include a time of fasting, which is amazing. It's great, a time of prayer and fasting in August to hear from the Lord about his plans for next year. The goal of this intentional time of prayer is to get the answer to some very important questions. And they are, what is the Lord calling us to accomplish in the coming year? Does he want us to make small adjustments to further refine what we're already doing? Or is he asking us to make significant changes? Are there areas of ministry that need a greater emphasis? And this time of seeking God should also include an honest assessment of what is happening within the church and the community. Where are we seeing the greatest needs? Where is the enemy attacking? Assessing the spiritual needs of the congregation is absolutely critical, and I know shepherds do this continually. However, we should also look beyond the four walls of our church and assess the needs of the community. Where is the enemy attacking our community, and how is God positioning our church to respond? The answers to these questions will ultimately guide the budget decisions that follow.
Wow. These questions, like, and what you're saying goes so much beyond, like, we need more money or we don't have enough money, So like, what I hear you saying is, if we don't start with the fixed expenses and everything we need to do, we need to start with what is God saying to us. So listen, everybody watching here, I want you to write that down. That's a key here to the budgeting process so that your church can accomplish everything that God has created it to be. So we've established that the budgeting process, like, again, it doesn't begin with spreadsheets. It begins with prayer, seeking God, getting clarity. Now, once we get that clarity, we get through August and we're processing here. How do we take that high level vision and now begin to turn it in to a plan that we can do? Like, okay, August 31st, September 1 is hit. Like, what do we do now? Help us out here.
Yeah, so that's where the next level of leadership becomes an important part of the process. Once the lead pastor or top level of leadership have clarity around what they believe God is calling the church to accomplish, once those high level priorities have been established, the conversation moves to the next level of leadership. This might include a youth director, a children's ministry director, worship leader, or other ministry leaders. These conversations with them should generally begin in September, because any decisions made at the highest level of leadership directly impact those other individual ministries. Like maybe the church is adding another service. Well, that's going to impact the children's ministry because they're going to have to staff a whole nother service and provide supplies and curriculum for a whole nother service. Or maybe a new ministry is being launched. Or maybe the church is changing its ministry structure. Maybe there'll be a greater emphasis of outreach and discipleship going forward. Whatever the change, ministry leaders need to understand the direction of the church and then have time to begin thinking about how those changes impact their area of responsibility. But these conversations should not be one directional. Leadership shouldn't simply say, here's what we decided, now go make it happen. No, this is an opportunity to engage with those ministry leaders and ask them, what is God putting on your heart for your area of ministry? What do you believe could make your area of ministry more effective in fulfilling the overall vision of the church? And really, most importantly, to ask them, how can we come alongside you and better support what God is doing through your area of ministry? These types of conversations create a much healthier budgeting process. Instead of simply assigning numbers to departments, we're inviting ministry leaders into the process of developing our strategic plan. These conversations should take place throughout September and October.
Okay, so you're telling me like September, October. Now, what I have in my mind is a picture of you get all the ministry leaders in a room, and we're going to have this like 8 to 9 hour meeting about budgets, which just, I mean, my head starts to explode here. So, are you saying everybody's in one room, or do we have these one-on-one with ministry leaders? Like, what does that look like to you?
Absolutely one-on-one. When you get them all in a group setting, there will be intimidation. There will be some that are more outgoing and more talkative, and others that are more reserved. And we don't want someone not to be heard. So those one-on-one conversations are best. Get with those leaders. You have a time to explain the ministry direction of the church, what the elders and what the top leadership are hearing from the Lord, and then begin to flesh out how those changes are going to impact that area of ministry. And then also being able to hear from that ministry leader, what is God putting on your heart? And you can always send out an email or have a meeting with those ministry leaders ahead of time and say, okay, it's August. You know that we are going to be seeking the Lord on what his plans are next year. So while we're doing that for the overall vision of the church, please you do that also for your area of ministry, because that way, when you get to them in September, they're ready as well with some of the things that maybe the Lord has put on their hearts regarding their area of ministry.
And you know what? I really, the one of the highest needs we all have is to be heard. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that as you hear every person, you listen, you hear, you value, but I also buy-in is so important. So they're already bought into what's happening, what's about to happen. There's an exchange of information, not just a release of information. So I think that's so key here, and so strategic as well, coming out of summer, getting geared up into the fall, but actually looking beyond the fall, which helps us have vision. So here we go. September, October are really about taking the vision and bringing the ministry into the conversation, just for clarity, and wrapping that up. And by the end of those conversations, leadership, that means everybody that's overseeing a department or ministry head here, has a clearer picture of like where the church is going from the church leadership all the way down here, what we want to accomplish, and how they're a part of accomplishing the vision, and what resources it will need to have as well. So now we need to take all of this information and bring it together into a financial plan. So again, all the conversations I've had, and so Mia, as those ministry conversations are taking place, what is happening on the financial side? Like, how do we begin putting everything we're talking about into an actual plan? Like, take us through this practicum here.
Yes, absolutely. So according to our graphic, we could see that while we're having those conversations between September and October with our different departments and different ministries, across the top, spanned across both months, you could see at that time simultaneously, the finance director or the treasurer or bookkeeper, whoever is responsible for the church's financial management, should begin assembling the budget workbook. Now, this workbook becomes the place where all the plans come together financially. Known fixed expenses are entered, things like the church mortgage payment, rent, utilities, insurance, and other reoccurring commitments are entered. And as ministry plans are developed and finalized, those financial needs are added to the workbook as well. So by doing this, we gradually move from vision to ministry plans to financial numbers. And that distinction is important. We aren't starting with the spreadsheet and trying to fit the ministry into the numbers. We start with the vision, develop the ministry plan, and then build the financial plan around it.
Wow, such an important distinction there. But like before we go on though, when you say the word workbook, I mean, is this an actual like you're going to sell us workbooks for $49.95 and we have to have the magical old paper, or is this digital? Like when you use the word workbook, what does that mean to you?
Yes. So I'm talking about an Excel workbook or
Okay.
Google Sheets workbook. Either one will work. So rather than me explain what it looks like, I'm going to show you, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay. So what you're looking at is the budget workbook, and I'm going to show you and talk through a couple of elements there. So columns C through K are the normal, like regular monthly budget report that you should be looking at. So in our example here, I'm using fictitious data from Vision Line Fellowship Church. That's my pretend church that I use when I'm teaching. And so all of this data is just fictional for purposes of teaching. So columns C through K are your normal monthly budget versus actual variance report that you should be looking at. And in that report shows you your annual budget, year-to-date budget, your actual as of that day. So like for this instance, it's August. So this would be actual for 8 months, and then the variance, the difference between. Each month, you should be looking at that because you should be seeing where the plan that we set out last year and where are we with that plan, and are we having a positive or negative variance? And those variances should be followed up on. Just a little note there. So for the churches that I work with, at the end of August, when we review and close out August, then I just make a copy of that, and then I add some columns and some tabs to use for budget planning for the next year. So as you can see, I have the next year's budget numbers and then a little place to put notes. And then one of the things that I really want to point out are all of these tabs here. And these are supporting information tabs. So you should have like a supporting tab for salaries. You should have one for subscriptions that list out in detail all of these expense items, and then have it linked to this main budget tab. So for instance, you can see this particular church, our example church, has a mortgage. So in column N, I'm noting which tab the supporting information is on. So I have just a very brief, like abbreviated amortization schedule for the following year that outlines the interest and principal payments for each month. And then I have that linked to this front tab. So any changes that we make on those supporting tabs automatically is updated on this main budgeting tab. And so as we start entering these things in, and as plans are beginning to be finalized and we start putting numbers in, then we will be monitoring this bottom number. Do we have enough funds to cover all of the plans? And then adjustments could be made throughout the process.
So I think a lot of the people here, especially the accountant type people, hey, finally we really do look at fixed expenses. They're really important here. And so we really do have to enter them. We do need accuracy and we need objective data. So that's what I see, I hear you saying here. So which is so vitally important. So when we're looking at this workbook with these worksheets here, and again, September, October, we're starting to like flesh it out a little bit here. Now, let me just ask a few questions here, very common. I know some churches that only budget off of 90% of the previous year's tithes and offerings, not the other incomes and those, because you can set those for each year, but according to their previous year. And some budget off of 100%. Now, do you have a best practice? Like, where do you land on? Do we take 90% and budget that, or do we take 100%? And then I'm going to throw another one at you, or do we just say we have faith? We're going to see, a 50% increase because God said, and so let's start spending 50% more. So I know I threw a lot at you there, but where do you land on all three of those?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just start taking one at a time, but I hear that all the time with the 90% and 100%. So I'm excited about bringing some clarity there. So first of all, it depends on what is outlined in your bylaws. So like if your bylaws say that your budget should be set at 90%, and I'm talking about your spending portion should be set at 90%, then of course you have to adhere to that. But as far as budgeting, this is the process that needs to happen here. So your tithe projection should be 100% of what you actually are projecting for it to come in. You don't want to set this number at 90%. You want this number up here to be 100% what you actually are projecting that you will receive based on trends, based on the trends that you're seeing, right? Then you can always set your spending, the total expenses, at 90% of that. However, you should have a plan for 100% of your tithe revenue. So if you only plan to spend the 90%, what is your plan for the 10%? I've seen budgets, church budgets before, where they're meanwhile, right? When they set that tithe projection at 90%, and then they're spending at 100% of that 90%. But if their trends are going to continue, you're going to get that extra 10%. It's likely to come in. So what is the plan for it? If it's not a part of your budget plan, like your plan for the year, I've seen that extra 10% that is going to come in, because if that's your trend, spent with less intentionality than if it had been included in the plan from the beginning. So my recommendation is I want to see this top number at as close to accurate as possible. And then let's have a plan for all of it. So if you want the spending part to be 90%, that's fine. I'm all good with that. There needs to be a line item on here that's telling us where that other 10% is going to go. If it's going to go into a savings or whatever. And then we need to make sure we're tracking that as well. And are we saving what we expected to save?
Yeah. And so I really like that too. Just again, a plan, a process. Even if you take the 10% and we put it into savings, that's still a plan. We're not just taking everybody out for ice cream every week.
Right.
So
again, to clarify, 100% of your revenue needs to have a plan. It needs to be
very good.
But your spending part can be set at 90% or 95%, whatever it is that you guys are able to do at the time.
Very good. Okay, well, let's look at this next one. I have a couple other thoughts.
Yep.
Fixed expenses, which are like there. Percentages, like looking at our budget as a whole. And this is very important, like with buildings, lease, utilities, or mortgage, how much there. And then specifically, the other real big one is compensation salaries for the staff as well. And I know there's best practices here and some parameters. I've heard a lot. If you ask Dave Ramsey, 25% would be for, a mortgage and all your building and facilities. And church world, typically it's about 30%. And then compensation, salaries and all. That means everything for those employees, right about like 40 to 45%. Now those are my numbers. I'm throwing those out to use. Are those good parameters? Are those hard numbers? Where do you land with those?
Yeah, so those are great parameters with one caveat that I'll explain in a minute. But those percentages are based on historical trends of nonprofits and churches, and they're there to provide a safeguard, because they know from history that when entities get to where they're reaching those limits, right, on salaries, and they're crossing over those thresholds, that it's unlikely to sustain that type of those type of operations, right, at that level. So if you can stay beneath or right at those percentages, it's more sustainable. However, I do want to note that those are, I like to look at those as your ceiling, that it would be dangerous and unhealthy to cross over those percentages. But if you can keep those percentages lower, by all means. So I've worked with some churches where the pastor has come out of like a business scenario, like he was a businessman before being called into the ministry. And so he has this other income that can sustain him. And he doesn't need to have a salary drawn from the church. And that's his heart. He's like, I'm okay. I have this other revenue coming in. I don't need to take a salary from the church. So in those instances, their salary percentage is going to be much lower than that standard norm. And that's okay. So I just wanted to make sure that we allow the churches to know that they may not fit in that exact mold, and they don't, oh, well, we're not at 50% or 45% of our salary. Let's go hire people. No, if you can sustain your ministry with lower, then that's fine. But those percentages are great to look at, because as you're nearing the top of those and reaching that threshold, then you can be cognizant that, hey, our ministry structure may not be sustainable for the long term at that level.
And trends are telling us that when you're under those numbers, those are typically the healthiest growing churches,
yes,
which is very, very odd. Another number I'm just going to throw out here is that that the senior leader, typically in a church that's about 300 or under there, I'm just using that range because when you start getting 500 to 1,000, 1,500, it's the percentages differ. Typically, their entire compensation is roughly about 10 to 14%. That's just an average, not like a hard number. I know for us, unfortunately, a few years ago, our compensation got up to about 56, 58%, and we had to make some major changes in our direction. It forced us not to do cutbacks. It forced us to go back to vision, training, equipping, and empowering. So I want to emphasize, it's not just about cutting back, it's about becoming more effective. That is what we're really, really looking at here. So, okay, Mia, we've talked about where the budget begins, how the ministry plans are developed here, and how those plans come together. So how and when is the budget actually finalized here? I think we're getting into October, end of October here. I think we're moving along. So help us out with that.
Yeah, great question. So as we mentioned earlier, the ministry conversations take place throughout September and October. And during that time, ministry leaders develop their budget request based on the conversations they've had with leadership and the ministry plans they are proposing for the coming year. Those budgets generally should be submitted late October, early November. Then leadership then reviews both the ministry plans and the financial requests. If the plans are doable and align with the overall vision, they can be incorporated into the budget workbook. But if something needs to be adjusted, then it can go back to the ministry leader for additional discussion and refinement. And I think that this part of the process is similar to putting a puzzle together. We're asking, how much of the vision can we accomplish with the resources God is likely to provide? Vision gives the direction, but budget sets the pace. So sometimes everything can fit. Sometimes adjustments have to be made. Maybe a ministry request needs to be reduced. Maybe something needs to be moved to a different time of the year. Or maybe a new source of revenue needs to be identified. Or conversely, perhaps leadership realizes that the church has an opportunity to do more than it originally anticipated. The goal isn't simply to make the numbers work. A budget is far more than a mere spreadsheet. It's a prophetic document. It gives you the authority to tell your money where to go, ensuring that every dollar is intentionally positioned to support the achievement of the church's divine mandate. So once the budget is complete, it should be submitted to the lead pastor and that top level of leadership for final review and approval. Ideally, that approval takes place late November, early December, giving the church a finalized financial plan before the new year begins.
Man, I'm telling you, what a relief. Listen, from now until Thanksgiving, you can accomplish a lot and you can have a peaceful holiday season if we put this into practice. I know it's always my goal before Thanksgiving to have everything approved. Haven't always hit it. Most of the times we have because we're organized, we're approving right about that second, third week of November. If we need to revisit it in December, we do here. So going into the new year doesn't have to be like just starting from scratch, starting from
Right.
ground zero here. Wow. So we have vision, everybody contributed, finances evaluated, we've agreed upon it all. We have a roadmap for the new year here.
Exactly. And that's the real value of the budgeting process. The budget is not merely a financial exercise where you could just check the box. It's strategic plan for advancing the kingdom of God in your community. And it helps us take the vision that God has given us and intentionally put our resources behind it.
There we go. Wow. This gives us a real great picture of budgeting and what it could look like. I hope and pray that everybody here with us today is feeling empowered, full of life, full of vision. And wow, if you have questions, keep them coming. I see a few in the box here that we're going to get to very, very soon here. So again, put your questions in right now. And again, we're going to, in just a few moments, we're going to give you an opportunity to get a contact information so that you can get that 30 minutes of coaching there as well. Fresh perspective here. Now, questions and answers here. And so I'm going to go here and I'm going to start, Mia, I'm probably going to put you on the spot here with this first one here. And that is the fifth point of the 5-step alignment here. And just could you just review those 5 steps for everybody here?
Yes. So the fifth step to answer the question is financial reporting. But to repeat them all, a strong financial management structure, whether it is your church or a nonprofit or a business or even your home finances, to have a strong financial management structure, you need all 5 of these. A vision, where are you going? A budget, roadmap to get there. Processes, those are all of the things that we do daily, recording our donations, paying our bills, those types of processes. Review is that month-end review where we take a moment to look at our data, making sure that everything matches where it needs to be. Our loan balances match in our accounting software, match our loan statement, our bank reconciliations are done, all of that time of review to make sure that our data is accurate. And then, of course, financial reporting. So that budget workbook that we looked at earlier, those first several columns are what you should be looking at every month. And that is, our plan that we outlined for the year and where we should be according to what time of the year it is. And then our actual and then the variance. How far off are we from what we projected? You're not able to have that accurate financial report if you don't have sound processes and a solid, robust month-end review process.
Wow, Mia, you're a machine. I'm like, how on earth did you have all that just in that one answer? So very, very good here. Hey, here's another question here, Mia, and that is, hey, I want to get a budget. I want to really work on this. Who can we get to help us make a budget? Like, who should I look to? Like, I know I need one. I know I need help. Where do I go? What's my first call?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So first of all, I would say look in at your elder board or your top level leadership. Do you have somebody in your church already that has business acumen and that can help you? If so, get with that person. If not, Pastor Rick and I are going to both provide our email addresses very soon towards the end of the webinar. And he and I have both agreed that we will offer 30-minute free consultations for you guys that need help with budgeting. So you can always take one of us up on that offer.
Very good. Okay, here we go. Is there a budget template? And that means like a church states that they have something similar, but all the categories and spreadsheet formulas would be helpful.
Yes.
Hey, I want to get better. How do we get better? How do we get this template?
Okay, so this budget template is available. It's downloadable with the purchase of the 5-point alignment method online course. So this plus all of tons of other resources, very helpful resources, are available in that course. So yes, it's available with the purchase of the course.
Very good. Good deal. And we're going to get to that course in just a moment, which if it's not in your budget, it needs to be. You need to get that in your budget. You need to get people trained more than just you. This is not only for the board. This is for everybody. When everybody understands where we're going in the vision, man, I'm telling you, vision drips and you're going to grow a great, great harvest with what you have here. So here's another one here. What are some of the more common mistakes leaders make in the budgeting process? What are some of the more common mistakes leaders make in the budgeting process?
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and answer that, and then Pastor Rick, I'm sure you could chime in as well with some
Yeah.
of the churches that you've worked with. So some of the common mistakes is, and Pastor Rick alluded to this earlier, is setting that revenue projection too high. They're saying, and they're full of faith. And believe me, we need to have faith in every aspect. We can't please God without faith. So I'm not saying that you don't have faith, but we do need to be realistic and we need to be prudent when setting the budget. I've seen very often where that top revenue projection is set too high. And so therefore the plan that follows that is set too high. And you have this spending plan that you're not able to sustain. So I would say number one is to make sure that revenue projection is accurate as possible and then set the plan for that. Now, if you are having a steady growth, 10% or 5% or whatever, if it is steady, then of course incorporate that, because we want to make sure that we don't have dollars coming in that don't have a plan for it. But you want that to be as accurate as possible. Some of the other mistakes that I see is not capturing everything. And so there's things that might come up that weren't a part of the original plan. So all of that, all of this planning, it all goes together with the 5-point alignment. You need to have an accurate chart of accounts to really track all the activity that your ministry is undergoing, and for it to track it well. Because the baseline of your budget, like the foundational structure of your budget, is your chart of accounts. So whenever I am working with churches, one of the first things that I want to see is their financial reports, not necessarily to look at the numbers, because at that point, I'm not sure that they're accurate or not, but it's to look at their structure of the chart of accounts. Are they structured in a way to capture their activity in a meaningful way? So I think those two for me are probably the biggest and most common errors that I see.
Yeah, I would say that one of the common mistakes that I see is just that a senior leader or pastor, even the top level there, just don't understand the numbers. They don't even know what the numbers are. They don't know what they need to bring in a week. They don't know what the percent, like those 30% for a building, 50, 45% for compensation. They're just unaware of those. So they're making emotional decisions, and they're saying, I heard God, and I'm not doubting they heard God, but the numbers don't support what they want to do. I'm in a situation right now where the numbers aren't supporting what they want to do. And so it's like, okay, where do you temper that? And so those are just some common ones there. I'm going to segue into the next one about, how much should we budget by faith? And because this is another one that I see leaders doing. Well, we're just believing God that this is going to happen. And then when it doesn't, well, where's the negative going to come from? And so I'm just going to jump into this one, Mia, if I can, because you already spoke to it there. And that is, yes, there needs to be faith, but there needs to be, I'm going to say, checkpoints like every quarter. Now as a board, I want my top board to look at the finances, at least have access to them once a month, that they have a clear picture of what's going on. And that's just my rule of thumb. Again, you have guys that work in full time and they're trying. So once a month, once a quarter, a deeper dive. Halfway through the year, we're really looking, hey, what just happened? Where are we? So we can make adjustments and course corrections. So hey, it's okay to say we're believing by faith, but if it's not there, where are we going to live here? And what are we going to do? That's my best, Mia. If you have anything you want to comment on there,
I think it's
that's
beautiful.
fine.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Good deal. And moving right along, love these questions, by the way, here. I love all these best practice percentages. What is the best practice for profitability and surplus? Maybe that's not even the right word for a nonprofit. Is it 5% in the black is good, 10, 20%? What's healthy? What's excessive? I'm just going to give my number first of all. I believe that a healthy church should be growing by 10%. Growing by 10% a year, financially and numerically. That's just my answer. Mia, we've never talked about this one. I don't know
Yeah.
if you have a comment along those lines as well.
I think that that's a good percentage to start with, but having worked with so many churches, it's so specific to that church's needs and the community's needs. So, but it should be running in the black for sure. So
Yeah.
you should have a percentage that's intentionally a couple of things, right? If we're going to get on this, you should have a certain percentage that you're sowing intentionally, and then a certain percentage that you're saving, and saving because you don't know what is going to happen in the future. Down here in the South, we have hurricanes, right? So we need to be prudent managers of the financial resources that God is entrusting us. That includes setting aside for emergencies and replacements. You realize every 20 years or 10 years, you're going to have to replace an air conditioner, or you're going to need new carpet. It's going to wear out, or you're going to need new paint because the kids are going to, whatever on it. Your building is going to require maintenance. So you have to plan for those things. So you can't spend 90% of your budget revenue. You have to set aside funds for replacements, for emergencies like that rainy day fund, and then it's available there if you want to respond to a need. Like if there's a neighboring church that went through some kind of fire, didn't have insurance or whatever it is, they had a natural disaster, you have resources on hand to respond to it. If you're spending everything that's coming in, then you're limiting yourself on how you can respond to needs as they arise.
No, very, very good. Excellent. And I also just want to refer people to our nrpastors.com website. Pastor Keith Tusi and I did a Creating a Culture of Generosity webinar, and it's found on there on just how to increase generosity in your church. I'd like you to refer you to that. Just one more comment I'm going to make on the questions that came in. Very common one I hear. They have two different budgets, kind of like a dream budget and then a reality budget. And actually, this is the way I was trained in doing budgets, believe it or not. It's been a long time ago, and I don't do this anymore, but we always had this like, well, if the world were perfect and God was bringing in 50% more, what would we do if money was no object? And I think it's okay to dream like that and think like that and believe like that. I just don't think it's healthy to live like that. But I think having one set of principles, but then having these other lists of things we're believing for, and then you can raise money for that. That's my best shot at all of those there. So I think we got through all of those questions here. Very, very good. And I thank you, everybody, for doing that. And here, I want to, as promised, Mia, I want to give away that mug and give away that book as well of yours. If you do not have the 5-Point Alignment book, you need to get it. So you're going to get the website in just a moment. But here we go. The winner is Laramie Stevens, all the way from Amite City. Come on there, down Louisiana. You're the winner here. We're going to be sending that off to you. Thank you so very, very much for being with us here. So in conclusion, Mia, here, just share just a little bit more about what you have to offer and what they can find on your website there.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I'm the CEO of Align Consulting Group, which is a full service accounting firm established to support churches and nonprofits with their accounting and finance needs. We offer accounting, controllership, and consulting services, as well as resources. And our resources include the 5-Point Alignment Method booklet and the 5-Point Alignment Method online course. The 5-Point Alignment Method booklet lays the foundation by introducing that core framework we discussed earlier of vision, budget, processes, review, and financial reporting. Then the course builds on that foundation, guiding you step by step through practical implementation of the method. The course is 10 hours of teaching broken down into 15-minute lessons that you can proceed through the course at your own pace. And it's most effective when the whole entire team takes the course together. Pastors, their leaders, and members of the finance team, they all need to understand how the method works and what their responsibilities are within it. Together, the book and the course form a complete roadmap to strengthen your organization's financial health. You can learn more about these resources and Align services by visiting aligncg.net or scanning the QR code that's on the slide.
Excellent. I can't urge everybody enough to tap into this resource here. Just wanted to let you know about the network of related pastors. We're a relational network. That's really what we are. We connect. Why do we connect together? Because we share resources. We support pastors. We strengthen local churches. That's right. Healthy leaders, healthy churches, because no pastor and no pastor's wife ever needs to feel alone or ever be alone in the ministry. You were created to have a tribe, a people you connect with relationally. That's who we are. You can check more out on our website with the QR code there. We also have a Band of Brothers conference coming to a city near you, one up north and one in the south, Pittsburgh in November, and McGee, Mississippi in October. Fight the good fight. What this is men, the Band of Brothers. We depend on one another, and the world is depending on us. Fighting the good fight. We're fighting for our faith, our family, and fighting to the finish. That's this year's theme. Listen, get all of your men there. It's going to be a great, great time as always. The men that come are going to be more committed to you and your church in the end, that's for sure. Hey, one more thing. You made it all this way. Here you go. Here's our email addresses here. Please take time, snap a picture of that. If you email either one of us, you can get 30 minutes of coaching for absolutely free. You don't have to get and, it could be or. Yeah, I can help you from the pastor side. Mia's going to help you from the financial side. We'll set that up for you. We want to help you succeed and see the ministry that's inside of you become a reality. That is what we're committed to, and we're so excited about that. So please email us. Let us know how we can serve you. Mia, any other comments before we sign off for the day?
I think that's good. We can give them a few minutes back to their day, and we thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Good deal. Well, hey, thank you everybody for joining us. If this was helpful, let us know. Questions, let us know. Have an awesome, over the top, blessed day.